Welcome to the Real People, Real Business show. My name is Stephanie Hayes, and I am a business strategist and coach who loves to speak with like-minded entrepreneurs to share their real stories and the gritty details of building their businesses. On this show, you won't hear about the glamorized entrepreneurship journeys that you see online. You won't be told how to make six figures in 6 weeks. Instead, you can expect to hear real, vulnerable, and inspiring stories you can relate to that have helped create the foundation for each of our guests' businesses. Goodbye, boss babes. Hello, real-life entrepreneurs. Today, I'm so excited to welcome my old friend, Jackie Johnstone. Jackie is an expert in human design for business, a breathwork facilitator, subconscious transformation coach, retreat leader, copywriter, and marketing consultant. She helps business owners create their own true capabilities so they can transform into the versions of themselves that serve them best. Welcome to the show, Jackie. Thanks so much for taking the time to share your story today.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. And I can't believe we haven't talked before. I mean, we've talked before, but I can't believe you haven't been on the show yet.
Everything in the right time, always.
That's right. And I mean, I think if we had done this a couple of years ago, we would have had a really different interview, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay. So fill us in. Tell us, how did you get to where you are right now?
Oh my gosh. Okay. The short answer.
Yeah. Give us the story.
I have been running my business online since 2013. And a friend of mine the other day called me an online business elder. And I was like, oh my God. Guess it's kind of true. It's been almost 10 years and this is an industry where people kind of come and go all the time. So it made me chuckle because I don't feel like an elder in any way, but I have been doing this online business thing for a while and it's looked different. And you're absolutely right that like, if we had talked 5 years ago, what I was doing is different than what I'm doing today. And probably 5 years from now, it'll be the same because that is part of who I am, right? I know we're going to talk a little bit about human design today, but for those who already know, I'm a manifesting generator. So I like to do lots of different things and I like to pivot. It's my favorite thing. And I have been doing it my entire life, even before I knew that I was a manifesting generator. And it's definitely shown up in my business. So I first started an online business, kind of out of like, not desperation, but like we had moved, my husband's a physicist and we'd moved from Canada, Toronto, Ontario to Bordeaux, France, for his postdoc. And I was really excited to move to France. I speak French. I love the French culture. I love French food. And I kind of got there and was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Like we thought we were moving for 2 years originally. That was the plan to begin with. And I wasn't drawn to like being a, tour guide or a waitress or teaching English or a lot of the other things that people in that expat community that I met were doing. And after being unemployed for a couple of months, which was really hard for me because I was like, I'm not contributing in any way and I'm not doing things. I like to do things. I like to work, but I want to do work that's meaningful. And that is kind of how I ended up in online business. It had never occurred to me that I would run my own business. I had no kind of role models in entrepreneurial or business space. A business for me at that time meant somebody that had like an office and like employees and like a brick and mortar type of situation, because the online business world that we exist in today was just new, quite a bit newer back then. And so the fact that I could just have a laptop and help people in some way, because that's what I wanted to do originally, was I went in to do social media consulting. Like that's the first iteration of my business, because that's what I was doing I have a master's in journalism. And I was in a communications position in Toronto and I knew quite a bit about social media. And there were a lot of people who didn't know how to use Twitter or, like how to set up a Facebook page. And so that's where I started and slowly started to make money doing that. It wasn't like an overnight, oh my gosh, I've replaced my corporate income, like success story because these things take time, right? To like establish yourself and figure out what you want to do, how you want to help people, like how to meet enough people to, make it happen. But I really enjoyed it. And I think it was pretty clear to me after a couple of months that like, I wasn't really going to ever be satisfied to go back to a job, because I loved being in charge of how much money I brought in and the fact that I got to choose my clients and choose my projects and like challenge myself in that way. And then in 2015, my business was really starting to take off. and I was working a ton. I got pregnant with my first son. And I had all these plans for like how I was going to set up my maternity leave. And I had done a ton of affiliate selling that year that helped me to set up like some income for when I was going to be off. And then he showed up 2 months early. And we were in the NICU for a month, and all of these like things I had planned to do with that last trimester kind of went out the window. And I ended up taking a full year off. And by the time I stepped back in, just something had changed. I didn't want to work the way that I'd been working. The type of work that I'd been doing, like things had started to shift, and I didn't really want to just do social media consulting work anymore. And it was a period where I was sort of trying to figure out what it was going to look like to be a mom and be an online business owner, and what did I really want to do. And so things kind of pivoted behind the scenes a bunch. In 2018, I had my second son, and I was like in between those two periods, working a lot behind the scenes in other people's businesses, basically acting like a freelancer at that point, running Facebook ads, doing copywriting, doing some coaching work for a coach that we both worked for. That's where I met you. And then when I got pregnant with my second son, I started seeing this thing called human design chasing me around the internet. Now, again, it was one of those things where now, if you're listening to this, you may have heard of it because it's quite a bit bigger now than it was in 2018, but it was just crossing my path over and over again. And I kept saying, what is this? And it sounds really kind of insane. Like it's pretty like woo woo. Like I'm a pretty scientific, logical, analytical person. And I was very skeptical. And it just kept crossing my path. And I followed my gut, although I didn't realize at the time that that's my decision-making strategy as a sacral manifesting generator, and decided I was going to explore it and experiment with it. Which is one of the things that I love about human design, is that really the underpinning of it is that you're here to have your own experiment and to try it for yourself and see how it works. And it started making things easier. I was like a super overthinker before human design, trying to like, intellectualize everything and plan out a path and force things to happen and make things happen. And there was a lot of frustration that can be involved in that. And having it gave me the permission to lean back and to respond to things and to let my intuition guide me, which is something that people had always said to me, but I didn't really understand like okay, trust your intuition, but like, what does that actually look like? How do I actually do that? And human design gave me kind of a manual for it. Like, this is how it's going to show up. This is what's going to look like. Here's how you can play with it for yourself. And that started the next pivot of my business, because once I got into human design and saw A, how it helped me, but B, how different we all are and our energies are, it was so clear to me that like, all of the marketing and consulting type of work that I've been doing, like that's the reason why sometimes one strategy works really well for one person and then totally flops for another person, because we are all so different. And so having that lens of human design to put on top of all of the marketing work that I had been doing really kind of caught my eye, and I sort of started to go down that rabbit hole. And then my business pivoted into like human design for business. And slowly I've been adding other tools that have been really helpful to me. Like you mentioned, I'm a breathwork facilitator, I'm a subconscious transformation coach, and it's all kind of for the aim of getting the person in front of me to realize how capable and trust themselves to run their business in their way. Because we are all perfectly designed for our purpose, but like how I do it is not how you do it. And how can we like take back our inner wisdom and put that at the top? And that's the goal.
And I love this. I mean, there's like 800 things I want to say to you right now, but first of all, I love this so much because it's so perfectly aligned with the way I approach business design, right? I very, very early on in this work realized that if we don't design a business for the person who's running it, we have a business that doesn't get any energy, right? Yeah. And so while I'm not rooted in any other concept, but that was just sort of common sense in my mind. The more people I worked with, the more I could see that if we're not coming from a very deep place of aligning with who you are as a person, even if that means you've got some weird Frankenstein business that nobody would think to build, if it's totally aligned with all the pieces of you, you're going to be successful.
Exactly.
Right? And so I love that you've taken this kind, because I remember when I first met you, you were still the social media expert, right? And when you started moving into human design, I was like, what? And I can't say that I actually still really understand it, because the biggest education I got in it was when we were together down in Corvallis.
Yeah.
And we started working through it. But I certainly, there's a lot to explore in it.
Yes.
But I love how aligned it is. And I love that you've put this really sort of practical spin on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like, what does it mean for you to understand? Like, I still don't understand how you get from where you start in human design to sort of the pragmatic pieces. So how do you, my human design. So how would you understand that my best tactics for marketing would be whatever they are?
Yeah. So there's a lot of layers. Human design is, I often describe it like an onion, because it's like there's layer under layer under layer. And it's like you can just peel one layer at a time and then you see the next one. And I think the trap that we can get into with it, and when you look at a human design chart, if you've ever pulled yours, or if you want to go and look at yours, you can go to mybodygraph.com and pull it up for free with your birth information. It's really like kind of mind blowing, because you're like, what are all these? There's these colors and there are all these different shapes on this chart, and there's these numbers down the side, and some are red and some are black, and what do they all mean? And there's a treasure trove of information there. And if you try and just understand all the information all at once, it's like, it can be a very interesting kind of thought experiment, but like, what are you going to do with it? And I am, like you are, quite a practical person. I want to do something with it. And some of that comes from, both of us are 1-3 profiles. And the profile in human design is your public role. It's kind of like the costume that you're wearing to play the role that you're here to play. And 1-3s are like, consciously, the first line is the authority. We want it to be built on some like solid information and expertise. And we're constantly looking for that, right? Like, I want the training, I want the certifications, or I want to go down the Google rabbit hole enough and watch a zillion videos and listen to 12 podcasts about it, right? And like really get a solid foundation. And then the third line is the pioneer. It's like very trial and error. Okay, it's time to start experimenting with it. And so it helps us to get out of learning mode and into action mode. It's kind of how I see the 1-3 working together. And so I love learning, and I'm like, I don't even know how many hundreds of hours I've put into human design learning at this point. And how do we start to actually use this? And how can I, with my clients, start to use this in their businesses? And the profile is a great layer of the onion to look at. It's a natural one to look at for marketing. And I think I've done, I know I've taught classes on profile for marketing, and I might have even done another podcast interview where I break down all the profiles, but it's like, we can look and see, okay, as a 1-3, for example, the types of marketing that work best for us are going to be anything where we can demonstrate our authority and expertise and share our journeys. So if you think about the content that resonates with people, it's like when you let your authority come through your life experience, that's what people really grab onto. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's super interesting, because I really found like the content that resonates with people when I create it. And I just actually had this conversation with Laura Belgray yesterday. And I was like, when I try to write about something from like a conversion perspective, like and there's a purpose behind it, it's just like sawdust.
Yeah.
Right. But when I try to create content that comes from a story, from experience, from something that happened, it's so authentic, and it's so resonant. And that's where all the creativity lives. And that may be different for other people, but it's like really interesting to hear you say that.
Absolutely. And I notice personally in my own experiment, when I show up and share, I often start posts with what I'm learning. And I'm like sharing some stuff I'm learning and how it's showing up in my real life. And I have a not podcast, because it's like 15-20 minute episodes. So I don't consider it a podcast. It's called Lumos. And that's what I do. I just let myself show up and talk about an experience that I've had and how I see it through the lens of human design or subconscious transformation or whatever. And that is what lands with people. Like the amount of notes that I get back when I write those types of posts, or I put up a podcast with a personal story, because that's the role that we're here to play. Like the 1-3 is the only profile in human design that's fully personally focused. Both of our lines, conscious and unconscious, are personally focused lines, which means that we are here to really focus on ourselves. And that's how we have impact on other people. So when we put ourselves in our own growth journeys, transformation experience, all of that first, that's how we affect others, not the other way around. So when you say, oh, well, I'm thinking about other people and like how to convert them, I mean, I think there's some other energy there. I'm not sure that will work for anyone, because as soon as we're trying to get something from someone, there's like the energetics are kind of sticky. But there are other profiles who are very what we call transpersonal focus, who like 6-2s or 5-1s, where it is about the other kind of before yourself. And so they can share from that place, and it does resonate with people in a different way than it would if we try to do it. So the profile is a great place to start when you think about marketing stuff. But I think the kind of gold from human design to start getting into practice, I know we've talked about this before, is your decision-making strategy. Mm-hmm. So each human design chart will let you know your strategy and authority. And together that's the decision-making strategy. And that's, like I said, how your intuition shows up. How do you tap into your body's wisdom and stop letting your mind try and run the show? Because our minds are super great at researching and thinking of different like arguments and opinions and like gathering information. And they're really, really not good at making decisions. Like that's where we start to spin. We get mind drama. We're awake at 3 a.m., like rehashing the decision we made 3 years ago, wondering whether or not we should have made a different decision. And our body kind of allows us to tap into the subconscious wisdom that we have, the kind of wisdom out there in the world, like all of these variables that our mind's computer literally can't physically consciously hold. And so when we tap into our intuition, we might not always know why we're being led to say yes or no, or to do this thing or not do this thing, but that's what is correct for us, right? And so we can just start playing with decision-making strategy and human design already. You're going to see things start to get more satisfying, more successful, have more peace, have more delight in your life. And that doesn't require understanding all the numbers or planets or lines or colors that are going on in your human design chart. So that's where I would ask people to start.
Yeah. So let's like take just a micro step back.
Yeah.
For people who are listening that are not at all familiar with human design yet, but maybe familiar with, like, there's personality tests and there are, quizzes you can take that give you some answer, which I actually think are like, there's quite a few that I like, for me,
helpful. Yeah.
Strengthsfinder, Clifton Strength. Like I find that one to be extremely helpful because it's a little bit different than like, who are you as a person? It's more like what strengths do you start with? But where do you start with human? What is it based on?
What is it based on? Yeah.
So let's just like work through the experience for someone who's totally new to human design.
Yeah. So as I said, I was extremely skeptical coming in, because the base of human design, I mean, it's based on a lot of kind of ancient, what you call them, technologies or wisdom systems, awareness systems, right? The chakras, Kabbalah, astrology, I Ching, like a lot of these kind of Eastern wisdom traditions underlay human design. But human design itself was downloaded by the father of human design, Ra Uru Ha, on Ibiza in the 80s in a like multi-day experience with what he calls the voice. So I know that sounds like he was high and he had some kind of experience, and then he came up with human design. And that for me was like are you joking? When I first heard it, like, really?
I mean, it actually sounds kind of great. Like I would have liked to be there too.
Right. But like, okay, like I'm not exactly like, the scientific side of me was like, really? Like this sounds like just like complete baloney. Right. And I think the reason, I mean, that's why I dismissed it a couple of times, the first few times it crossed my path. But the reason, like what kind of got me to come back around to it was like, okay, but when you're looking at this thing and it's combined all of these different traditions and they have this new way of looking at things, and you start to see, how the chart is put together and, what it's based on, like, it's quite complex. And I just can't see someone coming up with it in their just out of their head, like in the span of 2 days. So it's possible that he had some kind of otherworldly experience. You know, there are things that happen. There's things we can't understand. And the tipping point for me was that human design, as I said, is really framed as your own experiment. And you're invited into your experiment. And no one's saying, at least he wasn't, and I don't say this is religion or law or like the only way to look at it or think about it. It's like, here's an awareness system. Here's some things that might be helpful. Here's how your intuition shows up, how you're made to operate in the world and make decisions. Try it, experiment with it, see what works for you. And if it doesn't resonate, if it doesn't work for you, great, like throw it out. Like, I'm not going to be offended. He's passed now, so he's not going to be offended, but he wouldn't have been. I mean, he was doing his own thing. And there are so many people that have had human design become so helpful for them personally that I've worked with, but also just out there in the world, you can hear people talking about it now, that I think there's something there, just like Strengthsfinder or Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or any of these other systems, where it does help people to be more aware of who they are and like step in and give them permission to show up in the way that they want to show up and live the way that they want to live. And so for me, it's useful. Even if I can't say I 100% know the science behind it, or that this thing isn't completely made up. Maybe it is. I still think it's useful.
But here's how I look at these kinds of things, right? Like I think every one of these tools, let's call them, has some piece of information that's useful to you, right? Yeah. And I sort of look at it the same way I went on this journey around spirituality, right? I'm not a religious person, but I also am like aware enough to recognize that there's something else going on that we don't know yet, right? Like there's something else that is more than us. And so I went on a journey of learning about all of the different spirituality modes that I thought might be interesting. And I think what really resonated for me was, the Yoga Sutras. And so I pulled a bunch of stuff from there. But what I did is I hired somebody to just be like, educate me on all the different pieces. So I think like we don't need to prescribe to one.
No.
And say, this is my thing. I think that you can pull so much good information from all of these different modes to piece together a better understanding and awareness of yourself. And from there, it's a very powerful position to be in.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's really about, for me, like the human design is here to empower you. And there are definitely times where I hear some people speaking about human design and I feel like it's limiting or it's putting people into some sort of box. And for me, that's not the point of the system at all. Like, it's here to tell you that there is no box. Like, everybody's energy is different. And whether or not you ever learn all the details of your chart or not is irrelevant. As you said, you get to choose what works for you. And some people might feel pulled to go deeper and go really down the rabbit hole like I did. And other people might be like, great, I've learned that I'm here to respond rather than initiate. And that's really changed how I show up in my business. And now I'm good. I'm happy for either.
Yeah. And I think there are like bits and pieces that really, like when I did Strengthsfinder, I learned that my number one, like no strengths in the top 10 within like the executing and the relationships. I think I won in relationships, but everything for me is in strategic and influencing.
Yeah.
And my number one strength is an activator. And I was like, oh, this is why I'm the one who'll put up my hand when you go into those rooms of like people and you do an exercise and then someone says, okay, who wants to share? And everyone, it's like a rule. Everyone just sits there and looks around the room like, and I'm like, I'll go.
Yeah.
And I used to have this story that I was just a narcissist, or I was like, I wanted the attention, but what I really wanted to do was just like get things started. Like I hated sitting around watching everybody just kind of go, and I'm like, can we just go? Right.
Yeah.
So that was really good information for me. And I think that like pulling all the other pieces, I know that there's been a lot of interesting stuff from human design around how we move forward with things. And I think that was one of the things that really struck me, but I really haven't gone deep enough into it to know where all the other gems are. But the place you start is your birth chart, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can pull, like I said, you can pull your human design chart for free on mybodygraph.com, and it will, looking at the chart, it can be a little overwhelming, but in the information pane, it will tell you your type, and you're one of 5 types. Okay. Manifesting generator, and generators are the most common type. So 70% of the world are either a generator or a manifesting generator. And those are, you and I are both manifesting generators. We're here to build and create, and especially manifesting generators are here to do it efficiently. We like to skip steps. We like to pivot and change it up. We have like a lot. Generators and manifesting generators have this defined sacral in human design, which is one of the centers. And it's a motor to do and build that regenerates every night. When we sleep restfully, the next day we wake up and we have more energy to build and create and do. So most of the world is here doing that. The other 30% of the world are non-sacral types. 21% of that are projectors, which are the advisors of the world. And projectors are really, really good at seeing deeply through problems, how systems can be put together, the right questions to ask, how to guide energy, especially how to guide sacral energy, where we're busy building and doing, we might not be seeing the big picture that they do. And they're like the architect kind of in the project. If we're the builders, they're the architects. And then 9% of the world are manifestors, which are the innovators. They're really here to have impact and kind of really be here to do their own thing and just make it happen. They're the only type that are not waiting for something. They are doing it. If they're not doing it, it's not happening for them. They have to make it happen. And they have the energy for that. And then the last 1% are reflectors, and reflectors are completely undefined. So your chart is completely, all the centers are white, and that gives you a very special place in that you can really sense all the energy of other people, and you act as a mirror. So you're here to evaluate how things are going, and like how healthy is the business, the community, the group that you're in, the family. Like you are the mirror for the rest of us. And so each of the types is here to play our role in our way, and just understanding your type can give you a lot of permission. I can't tell you the amount of projectors I've sat across from and explained that they are a projector and that they're not here to be sacral and do all the doing and like work like generator types. And they're like, what? I just felt lazy my whole life. Like you just changed my life by telling me that it's not my fault and I'm not broken, and that's incredible to like, realize that for 30, 40, 50 years, they might've been feeling like something was missing for them, when in fact, nothing was wrong. Like they have a different role. They have a different way that their energy works, and that it's okay for them to care for it in that way. So there are 5 types. And then under type is strategy. And that will tell you for your type, what is your strategy, which is the first piece of your decision-making strategy. And so for generators and manifesting generators, it's always to respond. And that means that we aren't here to make it happen, despite what we've been conditioned, despite what society's told us about just do it. Like we're not manifestors. And so in order to know what we want to build, what we want to create, we need our gut to respond and to know, I'm really excited. I want to do that thing. I want to help. I want to make this business, or like I do not want to be part of that. I don't have the energy for it, or it doesn't interest me. It doesn't light me up. And our gut only works when we're responding to something outside of ourselves. Like we can respond to anything. Like I can smell coffee and feel that like, like I want that, or see a billboard and have a gut response to it. But I can't respond to just like random ideas that fall into my head while I'm having a shower. You can't feel my gut at that point. So when I initiate on those random ideas that fall in my head when I'm having a shower, that's when I get into frustration, because I didn't wait to see if it was correct. And since 70% of the world have this strategy, if you're listening and this is you and you're like, how do I know the difference between responding or initiating? The very first episode on my podcast, not podcast Lumos, is called My Shelf. And I go into like a whole description of like this hack that I use that can be really helpful for that. And then, so you understand your type and strategy before you even have to go any deeper in your chart. And that will help you already to those 2 things will help already. And then you go down a couple of lines in the description and it will tell you your authority. And that's the second piece of your decision-making strategy. And this is really how your inner wisdom shows up. Okay. And For generators and manifesting generators, it's one of two authorities. It's either sacral authority, so it's your gut in the moment, or it's emotional authority, which is what you have, Stephanie. And 50% of the world have emotional authority. And it just means that you have a defined emotional solar plexus, which is if you're looking at your human design chart, on the right side, there's a brown triangle. That's the emotional solar plexus. If it's colored in, you have emotional authority. And the reason that you have that the emotional authority kind of supersedes your gut response, or like kind of is working together, is that you have this defined emotional wave. It's chemical. Some days you probably wake up in a really good mood. You have energy. It's like you're wearing rose-colored glasses. Everything is up. You're happy. Some days you might feel blue. You have less energy. You want to be left alone. You're in your melancholy a little bit. And riding that emotional wave in order to know when something is correct for you is important for you to kind of sleep on it and not make a spontaneous decision. Because what can happen is when you're super excited, you say yes to going out this weekend, and then the weekend comes and you're like, I am not excited about going out this weekend. Why did I say yes to that? And I regret it. Or the flip, like if you're in kind of a blue mood, which can happen, you say, no, I don't want to be part of that summit. I don't have the energy for that right now. And then 2 or 3 days later, you're like, oh, actually, I really think I did want to do that. Like now I'm feeling like I regret saying no. And it's literally like allowing yourself to just feel the emotional up and down for a little while on a decision and come to something that resembles 70 to 80% clear. Like there's no huge emotional charge around a decision. And then you can trust, your gut in that moment to guide you. So understanding those 3 things, type, strategy, and authority, is where I would start if somebody wants to get going into their human design.
Which is so interesting because when I've known myself to be like a quick decision maker, and I'm like, I collect all the information and very quickly. And then I'm like, I know what this needs to be. And I usually just kind of stick with it. But I do know that there have been times where I'm like, ooh, I did that too quickly or what have you. So it's really interesting for you to say that and to hear that, because I think it's like very contrary to what I sort of consider my brand,
so I think, we often say to emotional authorities, you need to sleep on it. And it's a good hack in the beginning because it helps you to push pause and to not make decisions in the moment, because spontaneous decisions can be incorrect for you. And it's more nuanced than that. Like as you get to know yourself better, if it's a decision that doesn't have emotional involvement, you're not super excited, you're not super like there's no charge. Like, Stephanie, do you want to have pizza for dinner tonight? Like, you don't need to sleep on it. Like, you're like, no, I don't
like pizza.
So, okay, great. But like, you don't need to sleep on that because there's no emotional urgency. Okay. So like making a decision like that in the moment and trusting your gut is correct. But if it's a bigger thing that has more emotional baggage around it, then that's a great time, especially if you're negotiating something, if there's like money involved, that's a great time to be like, actually, I just really need to sleep on this. And I just need to go through my process. And one of my emotional authority friends, Jess, she often describes this for me as like, I'm in the high of the decision and I'm super excited and I'm really excited. And then I go down into the low and I'm thinking about all the reasons why I might not want to do it and why, it's not a great idea. And then I kind of come out and like, eventually you get to this sort of place where the ocean has calmed down. There's no giant swells anymore and you get to clarity. So that's what waiting for clarity can look like. Yeah.
So here's the big $1 million question, right? And this is the first thing. And I know that there will be people who ask the same question. The first thing that came to my mind when you first introduced me to human design, I was like, how is my birth time, place, chart relevant? Like, how can you know any of this stuff? Because there could be somebody born at the same time in the same place as me who's a very different person.
Yes. So because it's underpinned on astrology, that's why your birth time is relevant. Just like you get an astrological natal chart. Okay. If somebody's had looked at their astrological chart with the houses and the planets and all of that, like all of that is underneath human design. So that's why it's relevant. As for somebody with the same exact birth time and place, might be a completely different person. While we are all, a combination of nature versus nurture. right? And the human design chart is, it doesn't change. Like the one you had when you were born is the same one that you have when you die, right? So it's just like your natal chart, and it doesn't say, oh, you're going to be a lawyer and you're going to do like, just like astrology doesn't, right? It gives us the like broad strokes of your strengths, the places you might have shadows, the way that your energy is meant to like work and the way you're meant to show up. And there's always room for what we call conditioning in human design. So like the influences of your family of origin, of society, of all of the culture, of all of that stuff that shapes who you are and how this energy shows up and expresses itself. And also there's a level of how much in alignment are you with this energy? Because we all know that we can get pulled away from what feels true and what lights us up, what satisfies us. And we can look like completely, there are projectors out there who are working like manifesting generators or generators. But the problem is after 5 or 10 years, then they get completely burnt out. And so what looks like might be correct for somebody with sacral energy might not be correct with somebody who doesn't have that energy. And so figuring out like all of those external influences play a role on how we show up and, what we do with the energy we've been given.
So interesting because like I just said, you always take something out of everything in what you just said. I don't think we ever got to this level of the conversation before, but I've always beaten myself up for not being the ideas person and the one who comes up with the new innovations and that sort of thing, because I really value innovation. And I did all my post-grad work in innovation management. And so it's like a thing I love to study. And I wish I was that person who was always innovating, but I'm like Microsoft in terms of like the software world. They do a really good job of being fast followers, and they take an innovation and they turn it into something bigger and profitable and that sort of thing, because they have the resources to do that. And I've found that I've always been the person who can take like the raw idea and then run with it. And so that response, as opposed to like, can I give myself a break for not being a manifester, the manifester, the ideas person, and know that there's a lot of value and it's really aligned for me to be able to listen to someone's idea and say, this is how we execute on that. This is how we build that. I can still be strategic, which I love to do. But I also want to show them how to make that happen. Right.
Yes.
So that's really interesting to hear you say. So we know all the information about ourselves. We've done the chart. We understand all of this. Now, what's curious to me is that you went further, and I know you, and you're like, okay, let me go straight into this. Obviously, you've been doing a bunch of research, you've been doing a bunch of education, you've really kind of gotten into this, and now you've developed out these other practices around breath work, around transformation. Like where did that come from?
So because I'm a 1-3 and I'm really here about like my experiences, how I impact others, those were just those were tools that were really helpful to me. Like I got into human design for myself in the beginning because I was like, this is interesting. Something here is pulling me in. I'm going to start experimenting with it. It's giving me a framework for how to hear my intuition for the first time in my life. And then people started asking me questions about it. And that's how I got deeper in that rabbit hole. I was with breathwork specifically. I was in Bali on a retreat, literally the week before the pandemic started. It was my first vacation without kids, like since before I'm becoming a mom. So it was like 5 years. My husband and I had not gone away. We went away for a week together, and then I stayed for a retreat with my coach, Laura Hassan. And she brought in a local breathwork practitioner to the retreat in Bali. And it was like a full out of body experience. I had never even heard of breathwork. Again, it's another one of those things where I think people are talking about it more and more now, but 2 years ago, I had never even heard of it. I'd never done anything like it before, and lying down and just following the breathing pattern. There was music and I was having an out of body experience, and I was like crying at one point and laughing at another point. And like all the people around me were also having the same experience, but private, like we were all, in our own, like our eyes covered and all that. So it was a really strange, powerful experience. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this is, but I'm really interested in it. And I think I want to do more of it. And then I landed back in France in lockdown. literally like Macron, the president of France, announced the lockdown as I was flying home from Bali. And suddenly my husband and I were home in our 1,000 square foot apartment downtown Bordeaux with a 5-year-old and 2-year-old for 3 months, like 24/7. And you weren't even, the lockdown there was like, you couldn't even leave your house except for like an hour a day. And you had to be within a 1 kilometer radius. And like, we had small children, and it was just like, the whole thing was like, one of the hardest periods of my life. And I do not think that I would have come out of it with my mental health intact had I not been doing breath work almost daily. It was such a powerful tool for my own like emotional processing and my own mental health, that I was doing it almost daily during lockdown. It became like part of my like necessity of my energy routine in order to like just, in order to just be present with this intense experience of being locked in my house with my children for so long and not being able to work and build and create. And my husband was also struggling with the same thing, and he loves his work too. And he wasn't able to go to his lab and, do science either. And so we were, it was a pressure cooker, and breathwork really helped. And so after I got out of that experience, I started to get pulled towards becoming a facilitator. And again, like in my manifesting generator process, I had no idea like how this was going to fit in with my work. But I was like, I don't know. I'm like somebody like he's offering a training, and he was recommended by somebody at Jay Bradley from Breathe On It, is who I trained with. And I signed up for the training to do it. And as I was going through my training, in one of my own breathwork sessions during the training, the idea to use a human design chart in a breathwork session kind of dropped in at the end of the session. Like the meditation portion, always I'm getting downloads. It's like the best feeling ever at the end of breathwork. And I was like, okay, I want to experiment with this. Cause like, yeah, human design chart, when you know how to read it, like you can read people's energy from it, and like what are the types of things they might be struggling with, what are the things that they're really good at doing, and how can like we weave that into a breathwork session for them. And I did like 10 practice sessions with like friends and colleagues, and the experiences people were having were really powerful, and I really enjoyed doing them. And so it started to become part of the work that I do. Was like, okay, breathwork by design. Like, I'm going to look at your chart. We're going to do a breathwork session. I'm going to do like, affirmations or meditation using your energy at the end of the session. And that was amazing. And subconscious transformation was a similar story. Laura, the coach that I went to Bali with, she started bringing it into her work, and it was really powerful for me to let go. Like our subconscious is in charge of so much in our brains that we just don't even realize how much, because 96% of our brain is subconscious. And so when we've got old patterns or identities that consciously coaching ourselves isn't working, like I love thought work, I love the model, but like there's limits to how much it can change for us. And subconscious transformation helped me to release things that I had been struggling with for a long time. And I was like, okay, I don't know. I want to learn more about this. I want to know how to share it with people. And again, it's like human design. We've been talking about conditioning, and we can see that in the chart, like how much is your not self pulling you away from who you really are? What types of conditioning are not helpful to you embodying the full alignment or the full energy of who you are? And can we use subconscious transformation to let go of some of that so that we can really be in our energy, so that we can trust ourselves, right? And so all of these pieces are just parts of my journey that I was drawn to like bring into the work that I do. And up until now, they've been kind of siloed. I mean, I've been using human design as kind of the weave through all of it, but the 3 pieces of it now, like human design, and 4 pieces, because there's all the marketing and copywriting work that I still love to do. And subconscious transformation and breath work. They're all coming together for me in a kind of, I guess, coaching umbrella. So like when a client works with me, I get to show up and choose from this toolbox of like what's going to support them most on my goal, in our goal together of working towards how can you trust yourself more? How can you be more in tune with your own inner wisdom? And these are just tools to help you get there.
I think that this year, for whatever reason, has been an absolute like transformation for me in terms of understanding how much that underlayer that is important. And I know that, I'm a very practical, tactical person and strategic, but also 5 years ago, I would have like, this wouldn't have, it might have been a curiosity or an sort of interesting, but I would never have connected how important this piece is, because what I'm realizing now, and this whole journey has been really interesting, is that this soft underbelly, right? Like this piece of us is so critical to the success of our businesses.
Oh my God.
That like just layering on all of the frameworks, the tactics is not enough.
No,
it's just not. And it like you can have everything strategically in place and still not be able to move forward. And this is me, right? Because I have not uncovered and unpacked what's underneath, right? And I don't, without truly knowing yourself from that perspective.
Yeah.
So I think this is like what you've created is so fascinating to me and like really, really needed. And I think people on their evolution are going to eventually come to this place where they know that this work has to be done alongside the strategic work, the tactical work, the like architecture work, so to speak. And those two, that combination of those two is really where we're going, right?
I think that, this has always been true, I think, but I also think that it's even more true today, and it will be more true tomorrow and into the future, because we are all becoming much more discerning than ever before. Our own internal bullshit meters and also just like energy feeling, like, what is your energy really underneath this? Like, are you actually really lit up and satisfied, or are you putting on an act? Are you posturing or are you coming from somewhere authentic? Like even if people are doing this unconsciously or subconsciously without even realizing, people are getting really good at that. And your energy makes like 80% of the difference. Like the amount of people who I've seen, you can tell, like, I know them, they're in alignment, they're in their energy, and they don't have a professional sales page, or they don't have, they don't, like, their business structure is like could be scaffolded and they could make more money, but they're already making lots of money because people feel it and they feel their energy. And the flip side is also true. There can be people out there that have all, exactly as you said, all the tactics and strategies and the like beautiful website and all that, and they're just struggling because something hasn't clicked yet and people feel it. And they're like, I don't know what it is, but I just, And so that discernment, I think we're all getting, like, that's turning up around the world right now. And so getting our own energy into a place where we feel like we're 100% behind what we're doing is really important.
I absolutely agree. And I think that the missing piece there is that we can collect all the information, but without someone like yourself to sort of facilitate that and interpret and give us that like download, it can be a little bit like
I think there's 1,000,001 ways to do it. And there are people out there doing it in so many different ways, right? Like the people who need my medicine, right? What I do are going to be attracted to my energy and they're going to be my clients. And people who need it in a different way are going to get it from somebody else. And there is so many different ways to come at it. And I think that's what's important is that you look deeply at yourself and your own, like, if you had to really be honest with yourself, like how satisfying, if you're a generator, manifesting generator, like how satisfied are you in your business? How frustrated are you? Because those are our red light, green light feelings. Like if you're spending a shit ton of your time frustrated, you are leaking energy and something is out of alignment. So like we need to go in there and figure out what that is before you layer on a new photo shoot or a new website or a new sales funnel or some Facebook ads, because all of that is not going to work when it's being built on frustration.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. And so who are those ideal clients that you want to work with? Like who are the ones who are going to be attracted to you?
Um, this is really fun as a manifesting generator because things are always transforming. And I really feel like it's usually people are like, I just resonated with some piece of your story, or I could see myself in you, which I think is a 1-3 is normal. But generally it tends to be, really driven, passionate women, business owners for the most part. Especially if they've also been in a place where they felt like they were overthinking all of the things, like you're so smart and you've been rewarded for being so smart your whole life. You've been rewarded for being the good student, because when we're the good student and when we've been rewarded for the smart way that we show up, we kind of start to put teachers and mentors and authority figures on this like pedestal, and we get away from trusting ourselves and our inner knowing and knowing what our intuition is and how we want to show up. So generally those are the clients that seem to end up in my world. And I think it's the manifesting generatorness and my love of pivots, but people seem to end up in my world when they know they're ready for some big change. Or they might even not realize that they're ready, but then they end up there and then some big change comes through. So that's what they have in common most often.
And like last question, but how are you finding them? Like, are they finding you? How are you becoming known to them?
That's a great question. I generally am showing up and sharing my story. I mostly show up on Instagram. That's my favorite place to be. I've met, I would say probably almost all of my clients through social media or through connections through social media. I have a lot of fourth lines in my chart. So those of you who are fourth lines out there, you're networker type people. And so you know somebody who knows somebody, that sort of thing. And so I have connections with people and they have connections with people, and I end up on podcasts like this or speaking to other people's groups. So I get invited quite a bit by friends and colleagues to, oh, can you come to my mastermind and do everybody's human design chart in a group or that sort of a thing. So that's been another kind of source of clients for me. So generally, I'm showing up and sharing, and the people who are attracted to my message end up on my calendar.
I love it. Okay. So I have one question that I ask everyone.
Yes.
In the whole flavor of this show. And I know you're going to have some really good things to say about this. What's the difference between what we hear out in the business world, online business world, and what's real in business? What's like the biggest thing that comes to mind for you?
I mean, it sounds like a cliche at this point, but like there isn't only one way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think especially in the online business space in the early days when I first was like, oh my God, I could have an online business. Like I went through B school. Marie Forleo brought like a whole generation of women into the online business space. And that's amazing. And at that time, people were like, well, that's the only way to be successful. Like, I want my website to look like her. I want to be like her. I want to have a YouTube show, like all of it, because that was the way to be successful. And I think the more we can pull away from that, it's happening more and more every day, but the more that we can pull away from that, like that was the way for her to be successful in her energy. Right. So like, how can we figure out what works for us and what is going to feel the most satisfying, what's going to feel the most successful for us in our businesses, and how do we get back to that? I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with this, and this is the foundation of everything that I do. I'm a business model designer, and we have to build business models that are very specific and personalized to us, or it just doesn't work, right? Yeah. And I think in the early days, that sort of prescriptive guidance was really helpful, right? It like, if you don't know where to start at all, here's something to do, and then get going. And then we need to evolve from there. So I love that you're. Everything that you're doing is very much part of that evolution. Okay. So we are running out of time. I really appreciate the time you've spent with me. We could talk for like 2 more hours, but
I'm sure we could. We have in the past.
So can you tell people what the best place is to find you? And we'll put all your links in the show notes as well.
Amazing. You can go to jackiejohnstone.ca/more. And there's a whole like set of links there. My website is jackiejohnstone.ca. I'm on Instagram @JackieJohnstone.
Awesome. We'll put all those links in there, but I'm sure that people will be going out to find you pretty quickly because this feels like the time that we need what you're offering for sure.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I love introducing people to human design.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time and for the chat today. I'm so happy we had the opportunity to talk to Jackie today to hear more about how her business came to be, her experiences along the way, and what the future of her business entails. And I think that is going to be very creative, and I would watch this space to see what evolves. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Real People, Real Business Show, where we get real entrepreneurial stories and journeys that you can relate to. The show notes, resources, and special offers from this episode are available on my website and social media platforms. If you've enjoyed today's content, I would love for you to give us a review on whatever platform you're on to help us share these genuine stories with an even bigger audience. Until next time, keep building, keep dreaming, and keep being real.